Hello and welcome to the Veterans Journey, the show that shines a light into the journey servicemen and women face as they transition from serving our country to civilian life and why they're so valuable in IT and civilian roles. Today we're joined by Dave Pepin and Will Simmons as always. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
I'm great, Jamie. Thanks for having me. How are things with you?
Very well. Thanks very much. How are you doing today, Will?
Good. Thanks, Jamie.
Great. Dave, listen, really appreciate you joining us today. Maybe you could start off, tell us a little bit about your service history, when you joined the Canadian Armed Forces, and a little bit about your experience with the department.
Yeah, I joined the CAF in 2003. Had spent a couple years in the civilian sector post a college diploma in computer-assisted sound design. And the civilian area just didn't appeal to me at all. And then after speaking with my folks who spent 68 years combined with the ND, to get paid and jump out of airplanes is really what attracted me to the CAF. And so in 2003 I joined. 2004 I was over at 2nd Regiment Royal Canadian Horse Artillery in base Petawawa, and that's where I spent 14 years of my military career with only one posting. 3 years with the RCHA. Majority of the time was with my company, 3RCR, with as their FOO party, or the Forward Observers. And that really started my segue into the fires and ISTAR type stuff throughout my career. In 2006, I joined the Canadian Special Operations Regiment. And so from there, I did one deployment in Afghanistan in 2007 as an operator. And then after that, I had a love affair with being a JTAC. And so talking to aircraft and dropping bombs, like air traffic control, except you're not landing airplanes on a runway, you're landing bombs to support the ground force commander's scheme of maneuver. Eventually went into JTAC instructor, tours in Afghanistan in 2009 and 2011 as a JTAC. Went to 2013 Belize for a small team mission in Central America. And then 2015 as a JTAC deck commander again against ISIS in Iraq. And then 2017, I ended my military career for another government department. And I continued to work for 2 years, 2017 and 2018 under contract in Iraq. And at the end of my contract, then I found myself kind of in a void. And so from there, I continued further education, and that's where we are today.
Dave, I got to ask you about your JTAC experience. For those that don't know, it's an incredibly difficult position to actually get trained into. This isn't an entry-level position. In fact, when we were doing our platoon commanders training back in Gagetown, we had a representative come in and he actually said, yeah, this is what I need to study in order to qualify my trade. And I wish we could show that book here, but it was a very thick book to say the least. And you really got to get in the weeds about it. Maybe you can talk about your experience going from the horse regiment over through the selection process and getting prepared to become effective in that position.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. For the JTAC portion, I had an advantage because with 2RCHA in a forward observer role, I had an idea of the 3D spatial abilities that you needed to do that. But before I even knew what JTAC was, you alluded to the selection process. And because I joined CSOR in 2006, it's not the kind of hell week it is today. And so it was front-loaded on a course to do special operator things where we had these attributes and incredibly grueling physical and psychological events that the instruction staff would have us to do. Essentially 2006, that year of my life, is a complete write-off to become a special forces operator. And even once it was done, we went down to Blackwater to do numerous shooting packages and stuff like that to just become a little bit more well-rounded. 2007, my deployment to Afghanistan really saw me develop more as an operator. And then afterwards, as the unit in its infancy needed to grow, you see guys becoming breachers, you see guys becoming snipers, and we also had a lot of language stuff back then. And so for myself, it kind of fell on my plate. The guys were like, well, Dave's artillery background and he's got 3D spatial abilities. Dave, how do you feel about talking to airplanes and then dropping the bombs where they need to go? And so for me, that was just a big old smile on my face. And so 2008 began my JTAC journey, and that was 2008 was a write-off for me where It was learning that book you're talking about, which is no doubt the 3093 joint close air support publication, and I know it very well. And then CSOR does something phenomenal with our JTAC program, so Special Operations Joint Terminal Attack Controller. In 2008, I was one of 3 JTACs that started that whole line, and I'm the only one that was produced at the end of it. So there's a significant contribution from CAN-SOFCOM to develop these guys, and then the amount of risk that we have to take is huge. And so when you have this product, you can't have someone that's that doesn't cut the mustard, so to speak. So those challenges, once you've got it, then like the Special Forces operator, you constantly have to grow and grow. It's not just about maintaining a proficiency level, it's moving the yardstick forward at all times.
Thanks, Dave. That's great insights. I just have to say though, and what's it like when you come in through the forces and people think you're just a general military grunt, and then they drop on you this encyclopedia of knowledge that I wouldn't even want to guess the percentage of Canadians who actually have that training as a capability within the country and in the CAF. Like, it's very, very, very few people within the country have that capability. Yet you're this grunt who's expected to read through and fully understand the literature. What was what was that like for you as someone who went through training, went through CSOR? Was it incredibly challenging to digest that? And again, I wish I had it as a visual example for listeners to hear, but perhaps you can find the literature online. Like this is no joke. It's essentially like a medical dictionary specific to this trade. It's really impressive that someone like yourself can go and accomplish something like that.
Yeah, thanks for those the kind words. For me, I have the advantage, I think, just because I'm so passionate about airplanes, and it's kind of like a secret shame for me. So I'm already kind of invested in there, and I don't have to understand to some degree all the aircraft that can show up to support you overhead, where I intimately understand already their capabilities of what one airplane can do. For example, the A-10 versus the AC-130, 2 completely different kind of roles, and they're both good and within their own kind of respect. I was at a disadvantage for JTAC because predominantly the course was loaded heavily with officers, and my time in 2RCHA, I fell away from being that kind of college guy who was used to reading and passing tests, and really became complacent and just was kind of enjoying life and with my partner at the time. And so the first month in Gagetown, New Brunswick at the Artillery School of Excellence, where they teach the foundation of JTAC that CSOR JTAC do, that was the most challenging for me. Those 30 days of just constant books being thrown at you. And again, it's the 3-09.3 close air support publication. You can't find that online. And also a sub book is the JFire. And JFire comes out at, so that's one like something you can have readily available in your pocket. And that's not even encompassing like electronic warfare type stuff or more in-depth artillery fire missions or even naval gunfire for that matter. I remember at one point, just because of the map studies that we would have to do, I took my door to my shack room off the hinges because the door was 8-9 feet long, and that's what I needed to draw like a straight line from my gun to target line to the target. And you just see other courses happening around me. And my evenings were just that, just so I could pass my course. I didn't do that great on my test just because some of the things I was forgetting. But where the CSOR operator, the Special Forces operator excels on JTAC is the field portion. So when the guys get out there, the operator is then in his element. And so they're not uncomfortable in the environment. And so with that map and compass training that they already have, generally we've got a really great program there to set them up for success. And that's where I excelled. I was the first guy to qualify JTAC on my course, and I even got to go home early a little bit because of that. And I'm confident that I didn't get top candidate because I wasn't an officer, and I was also a corporal, which some people didn't like.
Dave, this is absolutely so interesting to me. I have so many questions, and I want to get to your transition story. But before I even get there, it really dawns on me that as you're talking here, you joined the Canadian Armed Forces. I won't call you a grunt. I'll let Will do that. But you went from being a grunt, as Will to in Will's words, to this elite task force, right? Yes, you enjoyed planes and you had a passion for planes, but we talk about this literature that you have to learn, this extraordinary things that you have to absorb to be able to fulfill a job where lives are on the line. How do you respond to people that say military personnel can't transition to a civilian career because we're not necessarily dropping bombs in the office? We're not necessarily, removing doors so that we can have a target placed in the right spot. You just went through incredible, intensified training to learn something that you didn't know before, and people put their lives in your hands. How do you respond to people that say, hey, yeah, we should do the right thing and hire soldiers, but don't expect too much?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jamie. I think the hardest part there is that my experience leaving the military and post my plan that I had that didn't work out. One woman told me, "Well, Dave, we don't drop bombs in Ottawa," and this was during a job interview. And so that's where I had a great learning experience there, because then I had to understand how to reframe my resume. And my resume wasn't built around I drop bombs. It was a question that came up of, well, explain to us how you do things that are challenging in adverse conditions. And so I brought up something that I did against ISIS in Iraq, which was perfect. But what they didn't understand, and now I streamlined that verbology, if you will, is all the project management that happens prior to the execution, prior to pulling the trigger or dropping the bomb, right? And this happens before you even deploy. We just don't kind of realize it as veterans, all the things that we are coordinating and meeting those deadlines. And I would even have to say that the fact that we show up to work 15 minutes early is incredibly advantageous to a lot of civilian environments that I've exposed myself to in the last 2-3 years, having left the military in 2017. I don't know how to have that discussion where someone can appreciate what it is that we do, but we have to help ourselves to be able to better define what it is that we actually have, and not just pay lip service to it to hear it from other organizations.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the CWEP program, the Cyber Workforce Enablement Program, the alliance partnership between Ernst & Young and With You With Me, and the exclusive partnership of Veterans Enablement Partner to the Government of Canada. As you know, the CWEP program is doing just that, right? We're taking veterans and the potential skill sets and all of the cognitive skills that the veterans accumulate over the years and years of service, and transitioning those to IT services. And one of the things that has really struck me over talking to a number of individuals that have served our country is a couple of things. Number one, they want to continue to serve. They want to stay in the fight. Number two, very proud to be soldiers, but as you pointed out, there's a little bit of a challenge to translate, if I can use that word, translate the skills and the potential and the experience in the field to how that will translate into civilian careers and into government or private sector, whether it's IT or another role. We have these programs that exist specifically within the government that says we should hire veterans. Do you think that's a little bit of a detriment, because it almost makes it look like a little bit of a charity, as opposed to, hey, you should hire veterans, not because you ought to, but because if you don't, then there's a problem. The veterans can actually help your team.
Absolutely. And I've got a lot of mixed emotions about that, just because of what's happened even recently, where, your question, do you feel like that's a charity? Yes, absolutely, I do. And to some degree, I don't believe D&D has been given the tools to prepare the soldiers for a responsible exit strategy. And at the end of the day, I think if I look back to the history of the Special Operations Regiment, where COs were not allowing certain soldiers to apply to Special Forces because they don't want to lose great guys, and then at the same time, D&D doesn't want to see this huge flood of individuals leaving. If I could bring up a story of an individual I know at Transport Canada, he was really miffed why his team wasn't accepted to talk in CSB Edmonton about why Transport Canada was such a great place to work at. And so that's just because they don't want to lose any of their people. And so I'm almost thinking that people may not want to have that kind of narrative of what it is the soldier can actually bring to that organization. Me and you know, being veterans, that we can do that, but it's only going to be veterans and veterans helping each other out to actually, like I said, the verbology of helping one another out, or see what your organization is doing. Because on the outside, I'm not seeing anything else happen there. And I think it was just last week where it was identified that the Liberal government's hire veteran program, about 25,000 jobs that veterans could apply for, only 800 saw veterans actually apply for the process, and only 25 veterans actually got hired in those 25,000 jobs. So I don't see that program as kind of a charity case per se, but there's definitely translation lost somewhere where someone, if you want to help your veterans, then do it, right? And just keep that horsepower going and move yardsticks forward, so those transitions can be easier, and then be able to just move forward post a great service career to D&D.
So thanks for that. A couple of things here real quick. I'd love to say I'm a veteran. Unfortunately, I'm not. What I do is I recognize the skill sets and the fact that veterans bring a lot to the table. So I'm a huge advocate. I want to make sure we correct that real quickly. The other thing I will say is working with government, that's what we're trying to do here, is really change that narrative, that this is not something that we should do because it's the right thing to do. We should hire veterans because they bring a lot to the table. And the conversations that I'm having specifically with government departments, I think there's a lot of individuals specifically that see that, recognize that, and a program like CWEP and others will certainly help bridge that gap. So I really appreciate those comments, and I think that the narrative is changing and will continue to do that.
That's great to hear, Jamie. Thank you.
I hate to put you on the spot here, but I just want to show just how small the military are. In fact, as you were speaking, you and I have met before many years ago in Washington, D.C. at the embassy. They were hosting an event. They were hosting an event for the Special Forces Unit.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, back in 2012, Canada's Special Forces Unit, you were with CSOR at the time.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a history lesson. Canadian Special Forces takes its history all the way back to the Second World War, when they were the first Special Forces Unit with the United States. So it's a little bit of, you probably know better than I do, the full history. Anyways, they're getting the Congressional Medal in Washington, D.C. And that's
awesome.
The highest award of valor that you could give someone, certainly someone who's not an American national. And so the entire regiment was there, and you were there for that. And I remember speaking to you that night. And in fact, you were trying to recruit me into CSOR. I was a second lieutenant at the time. It didn't work out with CSOR. I didn't end up applying, but it's amazing how
the small world
is. Yeah. So at least we ended up teaming up in another capacity. So to your point, Dave, we were talking about translating skills outside the military, and that is a challenge. And I actually used to work for the Canadian Forces Transition Group before I concluded my military career and before I started working with me. And it's not lost on the federal government that military veterans do have the skills. We just have to do a better job of translating it. And I know they're approaching at different levels. One is a very formal PLARing process. So it's literally translating those skills and getting them recognized into industry standards outside of there. But to be frank, and you know this being in the combat arms, not everything you're going to do is going to be inherently transferable directly to what an industry standard is. So Dave, you have the floor. If you could describe in your own words, what is it, those non-cognitive skills that allows for veterans to succeed, to leave the military and actually be successful with training and given the opportunity? What would you say CAF members possess that allows them to be successful post-military service?
I think from the combat arms perspective, the biggest thing that it is that we have is just the flurry of experiences that are thrown at us. And then that experience is planned and then executed. And then once the execution is complete, predominantly you do an after action. And from there, what did you do that worked? That's a point to sustain. What did not work? Why didn't it work? And now we have to recap that for later. So just to take those basic kind of Master Corporal Mod 6 type moments is huge. And so I completely fail to see why someone who's 21, 22 years old with a Bachelor of Arts History degree, and then someone who's 30, 40 years old coming out of the CAF with significant amount of experience. One of the ways I like to look at it is we don't do 9 to 5, right? Some of these things is if you're working on weekends, you're working on the weekend, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, or the evening. So you're definitely doing more than 9 to 5, especially in the Camp Softcom community. And so from there, it's significant experience that we bring to the table where you can learn quickly whatever job you have. And I think I can back that up with the majority of university students that I speak to, where when they go into the job environment, even if they're in their own field, they have to learn unique skills or just the how-to of that culture of wherever they've been hired to be able to do the job. So I'm not saying the CAF member can be an aerospace engineer if he doesn't have that degree, but a lot of jobs in government, they can sit at the desk and within a short amount of time, they will be in their element to be thrown lots of information at them. It's going to be new and they're going to sort it out. And then from there, with minimal to little mentorship, they can deliver a fantastic product that will then be able to add to the foundation of the organization that they're now working at.
Thanks, Dave. And it's more of a comment, just a follow-up exactly what you said. So either feel free to jump in or Jamie's got another question in the chamber ready to go. But it's more, you hit it on the head. And I think to sum up what you're saying, it's the abstract reasoning that CAF members developed throughout their career where they can they can find solutions using logical approaches without necessarily knowing what that outcome is going to be in advance. And that's because it's a requirement for us when we're on deployments as well, right? We don't necessarily have things know we're going to go. We have to trust our training and we have to use our best judgment. And that's something that you can develop over time. And in fact, in the realm of cyber and tech, which what the CWEP is organizing and training CAF members in for careers in the future of work, those are actually very important skills to have. These are all critical non-cognitive skills that CAF members already possess and are well defined based on their deployment history. And I think you're absolutely right. Like that's one way that we can transfer those skills that CAF members have and make them actually practical and relevant and required and highly in demand for the future of work.
As you're talking, David, it really just occurred to me that, you know, the Canadian Armed Forces took the time to train you and all of your brothers and sisters within the military to do extraordinary things. You became the best of the best in our country and globally at whatever field you trained in your particular case in the Joint Task Force, in the JTAC.
Yeah, JTAC, yeah.
Yeah, so the reality is prior to joining the department and prior to joining CAF, you had zero experience dropping bombs anywhere. You had zero experience. And correct me if I'm wrong, and if you don't want to disclose this, maybe you shouldn't. If you had experience in this before, but You had zero experience doing these things. The Canadian Armed Forces said, Dave's DNA suggests he can learn these things. They put you through testing. They put you through training. And not only did you become capable of doing it, you became extraordinary at doing it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's, I think just the environment that I was, like one of the best things that I take away from the CAF is, especially the Special Forces community, is you're surrounded because they're selected by just incredible men and women. And so, you know, my thing was JTAC, and I know that I did that very well. But there's other guys that have different abilities that they're incredibly strong at, and then I feed off of that to make myself better. And it's just an incredible environment where everyone's constantly, you know, escalating upward slowly and making the regiment better. But you are right that because they put me in those challenging scenarios, I can either walk away and quit, which is not something I enjoy doing. I like winning and I'm pretty arrogant about it. And so I want to be the best. But because of the hardships that they put you into and the incredible time crunches in which you have to perform, and lives are at risk or at stake rather, even in training, then you have no choice but to get on that bandwagon and then perform and execute and do it better the next time, and train your subordinates to be just as good as you are as well, and do that in an incremental approach.
What an incredible team environment that you just described, and what an incredible set of skills that, whether it's a government department, private sector, would be absolutely better for in having within their team. And I think that's why we're talking about this, right? We're not necessarily talking about like for like always transition skills, but when you talk about things like project management, when you talk about things like leveraging technology, when you talk about things like the communication, when you talk about things like following up on a problem until it's solved, right? These are all things that every organization absolutely looks for in their people, right? And what a great transition. I want to back up a little bit here, if you don't mind. We talked a little bit about, but why did you leave the Canadian Armed Forces? What was your journey like in terms of leaving? You know, when did that occur? And maybe talk to us a little bit about your experience in leaving the Canadian Armed Forces and your transition story.
The wanting to leave the Canadian Armed Forces stemmed from a couple things. So love being a JTAC, love airplanes and dropping bombs. That was a lot of fun, but like it really gets heavy on the shoulders, and for me, quite literally. So I couldn't see myself like my father before me, who did 38 years with DND. And then, so as an opportunity came around, I said, this is somewhere where I can go do some comfortable stuff over in Iraq. And then after a couple years, as promised by another government department, then like be at my forever desk job. I know I earned it. I'll be able to contribute to that kind of environment, and be surrounded with other veterans that were there, be moved to Ottawa, which I am based now, and then just see my children develop, you know, into adults, and then eventually they take off, right? So it wasn't uncommon in special operations to be gone 6 to 9 months out of the year, even if you had a tour or not, especially as a JTAC, because you got to go where the jets are and where you can actually drop bombs. And so leaving the CAF felt like I was cheating on somebody, like going through the job interview and doing that stuff. So it was very emotional for me. And then having gone into the other government department, it felt like a relief, but I was still kind of emotionally invested with the guys. But as soon as you leave, like they cut the cord and you're gone. And so there was, you know, kind of some wounds there, self-inflicted, but also with regards to the Special Operations Regiment, where like to this day, I don't have a certificate of service from DND. And for 2 years, you know, I literally kicked and screamed about me paying my monthly dues into the regimental fund, and I received nothing but a handshake at a beer call. After that, I didn't want to go back to Special Operations or DND, just because my footprint of going overseas was so significant. And for me, I just wanted to do something different. So it kind of tied in with, I want Dave's story to be more than just, he was the guy that dropped bombs. And so today, I don't have a choice really, but now I'm studying a master's in business administration. I'm being supported by the Syntax team where I'm doing use case files and identifying technology for our brothers and sisters in arms to be able to bring that to the battlefield. And the CEO, Mike Nelson, is an incredible leader and mentor to me to be able to assist with the transition and some of the hardships that presently going through. And that's where I am at today. So the way I look at it is 2006 was a write-off to become a special forces operator. 2008 was a write-off as I became a JTAC. And so my next 20 months is a write-off, so to speak, because I'm doing an executive MBA, and that'll give me the educational foundation I require. So all my CAF experiences can stand on and then have more credibility in front of human resources department as I look for employment down the line.
Ideally, where would you want to see yourself in government participating in what capacity? Given what you know about your own experience and CAF experience, where do you think you'd be best utilized in government, in what role?
That's a really heavy question that about a year ago when I started looking into my MBA, I literally just wanted a piece of paper. And then next thing you know, I was accepted into the MBA, and then it's like, wow, this thing's going to move forward. And today, about a month into the MBA and having met my cohort and being approached by alumni, there's a lot that I don't know of. So today I keep my options open. I have time, and I have employment through Syntax, which, I'm comfortable with what I'm doing right now. However, I'm going to keep those options open so that I can find the best avenue where I can be employed. Some of the challenges that I do have as moving towards post-traumatic stress is if I stay in the military domain, I have to revisit some of those times that I spent in Afghanistan and Iraq, which isn't always a great story, even though a lot of them are good stories. And then some of it goes back to, me wanting to divorce myself from JTAC and not having that same story all the time. So UAV and drone experience seems to be coming back quite often, but I can see myself as I become a civilian more and more every other week, kind of feel it come off the shoulder, so to speak. I can see myself wanting a new challenge and investing in something that's new, so I can potentially feel accepting a new challenge would be definitely the way that I want to go on this. But I've got time before I make that decision.
Given a lot of comments and a lot of commentary and a lot of insight into your experience, but also into some of the things that I think that your brothers and sisters in arms have faced. Maybe just as we wrap up here, two things. Number one, knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently in your transition experience? And then finally, and I think Will may have asked this question as well, but I want to give you the floor in terms of hiring veterans and making a place for them within the civilian workspace. What would you want to say to those that are hiring?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first question there. And so seeing the amount of time that I was away and being in San Diego and New Mexico and Iraq and just kind of having downtime where you're taking care of your kit and seeing how online works today, I would definitely advise veterans to have their plan B or their plan C being a degree. Go out there, especially for some of those soft personnel. Leicester University, I think it is, out in the UK. They've got a fantastic program where you a couple of years and then you come out with a degree. That's definitely the foundation backstop, I think, is that educational piece that guys need before they take off. The other one would be is your personal support group. And so with the hardships that I went through, that personal support group that was immediately around me dissolved. Some of it was quite shocking, where individuals were not, in a position that they wanted to be into to be able to support you through that. And quite honestly, I receive support today now from the four corners of the planet, and it's really interesting to see who came out to be that support, wind under the wings, providing lift, so to speak. So with regards to that is invest in the people that are worth it with regards to in the event that you need support, that they will be there for you. That was a big one for me. Yeah, hiring a veteran is not just the right thing to do. I know you guys are saying that a lot, and it still baffles me because of the experiences that we bring to the table. And so, like Will said, right, we have to work on our translation there. And if employers give the soldier some time, because I hear it a lot, especially in my MBA, where veterans are skilled. Well, what does it mean, and what is the skill that they bring to the workplace? And I think to some degree, just saying that they do work is because I've seen it now in the civilian environment where people show up late for meetings and it's no big deal, right? And then for us, like we had the guillotine just above us if you didn't show up 5, 10, 15 minutes early. And so just that kind of basic that the soldier masters is what allows them to have that advantage to get into a workplace. And then when they see new content come forward to them, they will master that. Because quite honestly, I think a lot of men and women from the forces feel shame if they don't get it right. We beat ourselves up. And that comes from instructors beating us up if we fail that task. And so the skills and the experience there are the things that the experience of it's not 9 to 5, doing it in austere conditions. And now you want us to do this at a desk in an air-conditioned environment. And oh yeah, I don't have to be at my desk when I'm having lunch from 12 to 1. These are environments where we're going to be comfortable and we're going to be able to apply that probably even better than we did do it in the forces.
When would you suggest to CAF members that they should start thinking about transition?
With regards to the transition, I would definitely suggest that as soon as you can start working on an educational piece or a degree, do that as soon as possible. And with regards to your transition, knowing what I know today about how I left the CAF and just got a handshake and was left out there, is keep your options open. After Iraq in 2015, that was my fifth deployment. And then how many times do I have to rewrite kind of Dave's Hollywood story, right? So if I left in 2009 for whatever opportunities that came up, that'd be cool because I was really proud of what I did in 2009 and employing an A-10 for the first time in anger in Afghanistan, but all the other experiences that I had from the CAF. And then 2015 was really, well, how much more of this am I willing to really do as it weighs on your shoulders and in your head and stuff like that. Whereas I'm 41 today, I've got another 20 years of service left in me, but it doesn't have to be on my 8th, 9th, or 10th deployment. And so I would say that to veterans, just keep your options open and keep looking out there. The one thing I'm working on right now and being championed on LinkedIn is you are a brand. And a guy put it out there where he said, well, I don't really work on brand management because there's 90,000 soldiers out there, so we're all selling the same thing. And this individual was talking about how in the United States, there's 50,000 different companies that sell hamburgers, and they're all kind of the same thing. And you can look at it like as dating, right? And you're going to approach a woman, but you're a man, but from one man to another, we're all made the same way, but we're not the same. And so keep your options open, work on your own personal brand management, reach out there to people and make things happen for yourself.
That's great insight, Dave. I really thank you for that. Just a reminder that the Veterans Journey is brought to you by the CWEP program, the Cyber Workforce Enablement Program, an alliance partnership between Ernst & Young and With You With Me as the exclusive veterans enablement provider to the Government of Canada in IT roles. With You With Me and EY are committed to assisting military personnel transitioning from service to technology roles by harnessing potential, proven skills, and everything you talked about today, Dave. We thank you for your time. We want to extend our highest form of gratitude, and I certainly appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us about your journey specifically, and also shed a light on perhaps why veterans, specifically in IT roles, would make it a tremendous fit and bridge that gap between supply and demand. So thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
If you want to reach out to Dave, you can reach him on LinkedIn, Dave Pepin. Also, Jamie and I are also available if you want to discuss anything on CWEP. Sign up at withyouwithme.com. You can also reach out to Jamie and I on LinkedIn at Jamie O'Hare or William Arthur Simmons. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Also, you could reach out at ey.com if you want to find out more about the Cyber Workforce Enablement Program, the CWEP. Thanks so much, everyone.
Take care.